Welcome to another edition of Views from an Old Polish Perspective. We got to take a look at what's happening over in Israel, that invasion, the retaliation, and everything else. And then we got to ask ourselves, do we got to take some of the responsibility? Come on now, we're supposed to be out spreading the gospel, and there's one point, no one can argue the point. Hamas could have really used advice from the Bible in this one. And we got to look at Luke chapter 14 verse 31. Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 can defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against them? Well, obviously, Hamas never saw that one, so they decided to make the decision on their own, and that is dangerous. Well, without a doubt, a good portion of the world has gone totally insane, or shall we just say the insanity has been exposed. Over 2,000 dead in Israel and Gaza as the war rages on. Babies are beheaded by Hamas to make a statement.
On Israel.
What statement was that?
Impact here on the streets of Australia. What I'm about to speak about is distressing for all of us, but it's happening and it's important. Overnight, the most horrific news imaginable. The Israeli Defense Force discovered the bodies of 40 babies and young children. They'd been killed, some even beheaded. Babies found dead next to their cots. The shocking sight of babies and young children with their heads cut off meant that the soldiers who found them and recovered their bodies were seen crying and comforting each other. International media went to one kibbutz with the IDF to examine and record the carnage, and here is a snippet from that report. These Hamas terrorists targeted and mutilated the most vulnerable, pregnant women and tiny babies. Jacqueline Magnay in The Australian writes that the atrocities from the Kfar Azar, as well as Kibbutz Be'eri and Kibbutz Re'em, shows that the Hamas militants were intent on brutalising their mass murder spree to leave a deep psychological imprint on those left behind. She writes that in one harrowing image from Kfar Azar, a baby cot with a small dress on the top is drenched in blood. She writes that I-24 news correspondent Nicole Zedek said soldiers had told her that many babies were found next to their cots with their heads cut off. And her colleague, also at Kfar Azar, said we're talking about burned houses with entire families killed inside, women and children whose heads have been cut off. She said it's the apocalypse. Many bodies were still lying in the street. And here's Nicole Zedek breaking down as she describes what she saw.
David, it's hard to even explain exactly just the mass casualties that happened right here. In fact, the Israeli military says they still don't have a clear number, but I'm talking to some of the soldiers and they say what they've witnessed as they've been walking through these different houses, these different communities, babies, their heads cut off. That's what they said. Gunned down, families completely gunned down in their beds. You can see some of these soldiers right now comforting each other.
And as we look at this, we got to look at a little bit more of the news. The insanity that's coming out of the news. BLM came out in support of Hamas and the tactics they used. Now we got to ask ourselves a question. What happened to the billions of dollars BML leaders collected? Have they rebuilt a single business they burned down during those riots? You can see how their demonstrations were designed to disrupt an election. Remember, right after the election, BLM went away. An election where people in blue cities faced threats of violence. We witnessed blue city mayors and blue city governors working together with local gangs organized by BLM to attack businesses in the name of equality. Good old-fashioned communist equality where everyone is out of a job, forced to rely on the state, just where communists want people. BLM glorified the efforts in Gaza because Hamas was able to cause the destruction of an entire city, a goal BLM fell short on. Now, history has shown this is nothing new. We can see radical factions joining together in their lust for death and destruction in the worst imaginable ways. It is as if they're competing against one another. Now, what causes frenzy of demonic acts? For one thing, we see how the world is being divided between those who want nothing more than to live in peace and those who are so sadistic they want nothing less than to see the world suffer, as if they are being directed by Satan himself. Now, there's one video that kind of sums up, for lack of a better term, the stupidity behind the support for Hamas and the attack on Israel.
West Bank of the Mediterranean. They did a full sea, air, and ground invasion. The amount of logistics involved in this is insane. This may be 5,000 miles away, but have you seen the streets of just a few of our major cities, particularly New York, this weekend? Here's a rally put on by the Democratic Socialists of America. Had a guy holding up a swastika flag cheering for Hamas. Maybe instead of Catholic churches, the FBI should be putting as many resources into monitoring Hamas sympathizers while they spit on New York City cops. That's happening. Maybe check out this woman right here. Happily living in America, by the way, an ally of Israel, taking full advantage of our First Amendment right, which she wouldn't have in Gaza, by the way, because in that culture, women's rights are quite limited. But just to show you how much further the stupid can go, again, here in America, where people are safe, ladies and gentlemen, I give you perhaps the greatest failure of the American education system. Never mind the fact that women can't march in the street at all over there, let alone in a bra, and in any Palestinian area, or with Hamas. These people in political control of the Gaza Strip are militants. And those are the people who just sent troops to invade Israel. And yet you have gay pride people here in America praising them, freeing them. As you can see here, in that area, they will literally execute you for being gay. I'm at a loss of how these people can be this foolish. But this is where we're at in America.
So let's take a quick look at that Democratic Socialist Party mentioned in that video. The Democratic Socialist Party actually has members of that cult in Congress that support Hamas. The execution of Israelites and slaughtering of babies. You know, here's the leaders of that group. Are there no standards in America? What do we see when a Democratic Party refuses to stand up to the communists in their party, but instead chooses to defend their radical terrorist views? I mean, man, we are in a sad state, and it is just getting worse and worse and worse. There has to be a reason why those demons are allowed to go so far. Of course, there are lessons to learn from this, and we want to search the scriptures to find out where we are in prophetic time. Now, the first place to look is, of course, Revelation. And the most logical place to begin is Revelation 16, the story about Armageddon. Okay, we're going to jump right into Revelation 16, verse 16, where we find Armageddon. and the demonic spirits gathered all the rulers and their armies to a place with the Hebrew name Armageddon. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding, because what a lot of people do, these evangelists and stuff, TV prophets, internet prophets, they confuse the two battles together. In this one, we see the demonic spirits gathered all the rulers together, and it is in Armageddon. Now, when we click on this Revelation 16:16, we come up with this TSK, which is kind of a chain reference of related scripture in the Bible, and we're going to go through and do a study that's going to go through all of these at a later time, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. And we're going to take a look at what they thought when they put this TSK together, what were the references in the Bible that put this stuff together. It's kind of interesting. But right now we're just going to click on this editor to where I copied these in, and we're going to take a deeper look into Revelation 16, back up a couple of verses so we know what they're actually talking about here. And I saw 3 evil spirits that look like frogs leap from the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Now, basically, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are controlling these 3 evil spirits, these frogs that came out of their mouth, and the demonic spirits gathered all rulers and their armies to a place in the Hebrew name Armageddon. So this is the first battle. And we'll just take a look at what happened, a short explanation in Revelation 16 about the first battle. Then the 7th angel poured out his bowl into the air. So this is the 7th, the last of the last 7 plagues. And a mighty shout came from the throne in the temple, saying, "It is finished." Then thunder crashed and rolled, and lightning flashed, and a great earthquake struck, the worst since people were placed on the earth. And there are references up here that this TSK put together that explain in more detail about this earthquake. So God remembered all of Babylon's sins, and he made her drink of the cup that was filled with the wine of his fierce wrath. Now this right here brings us back to the judgment in Revelation 14. And every island disappeared and all the mountains were leveled. So the earth is pretty much decimated. And there was a terrible hailstorm, and hailstones weighing 75 pounds fell from the sky onto the people below. They cursed God because of the terrible plague of the hailstorm. Okay, so right here we got the introduction. This is the introduction to that battle. All right. So we see one of the references is Revelation 19:17 through 21. I copied it down here. And we're going to see what this says about it. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky, "Come, gather together for the great banquet God has prepared. Come and eat the flesh of kings, generals, and strong warriors, of horses and their riders, and all humanity, both free and slave, great, small and great." Then I saw the beast and the kings of the world and their armies gathered together to fight the one sitting on the horse and the throne. Here we've got the connection, the beast and the kings. What do we see up here? These 3 frogs came out of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophets. So when we see the beast over here, we know that this beast is tied to the same beast in Revelation 16, and this is the same battle. That's just the way the Bible was written. From Revelation 16 all the way through Revelation 19 is the description of that battle. So we got to read a couple of chapters to know what the Bible is talking about, why it's giving us such a long explanation on this one battle. And the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who did many miracles on behalf of the beast miracles that deceived all who had accepted the mark of the beast and who worshipped his statue. Both the beast and the false prophet were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. So here we have the beast and the false prophet. Here we got the beast and the false prophet. And of course, the dragon is Satan. All right? You notice the dragon was not thrown into the lake of burning sulfur in Revelation 19. Their entire army was killed by the sharp sword that came from the mouth of the one riding on the white horse, and the vultures all gorged themselves on the dead bodies. Okay, like I said, there is another war or another battle, and we have to understand there's two battles, two separate battles. Who gathered the armies for that first battle? That was the demons represented by the frogs, and they came out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So when we take a look at Revelation 20, we notice that in Revelation 19, the dragon was not thrown into the lake of fire. But in Revelation 21, it explains, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit and a heavy chain in his hands." Now this is also explained in some of the chain references above that we'll see. He sees the dragon, the old serpent, who is the devil, Satan, and bound him with chains in 1,000 years. Okay, so right here we see this is explained. It's interpreted. Who is the dragon? It's interpreted. It's Satan. All right, so the Bible interprets it so. And we're going to stick with that rule throughout all of our studies. The angel threw him into the bottomless pit, which he then shut and locked, so Satan could not deceive the nations anymore until 1,000 years were finished. Afterwards, he must be released for a while. We go down a couple more verses. When the 1,000 years came to an end, Satan will be let out of the prison. Right? Okay, so this is just Satan. He will go out to deceive the nations called Gog and Magog. So we see right here, the second battle, this is Revelation 20, has the second battle. In the first battle, the three frogs gathered the armies. In the second battle, Satan gathered the armies together. In every corner of the earth, he will gather them together for battle, a mighty army as numerous as sand along the seashore. And I saw them as they went up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded God's people and the beloved city. Now, if we had looked at the full chapter of Revelation 20, that's where the new city, Jerusalem, comes down to earth. So the devil himself gathers the army in the second battle, and they surround the new city, Jerusalem, not Armageddon. So do not ever confuse the two battles. If you know there's two battles, you can understand, when we look at those references in another study, you can understand that some of the references refer to the first battle at Armageddon. Some of them refer to the second battle that we're looking at right here in Revelation 20. But fire from heaven came down on the attacking armies and consumed them. Then the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the fiery lake of burning sulfur, joining the beast and the false prophet. Right here we are. Explained plain as day, so there should be no confusion. There they will be tormented day and night forever. Now, how does this answer the question of where are we in prophetic time with this war in Israel? Well, what we got to do is we got to take a look back at a couple of other chapters, and we're sitting right here in Revelation 16, but it begins with the word then, which means we got to look at Revelation 15 to understand what was going on before this battle occurred. Are we in Armageddon at this time? Well, we got to find out what happens before that battle of Armageddon. Well, right here, when we look at 15, we look at the 7 angels holding the last 7 plagues is introduced. And I looked and saw the temple in heaven. God's temple was thrown wide open. The temple has to be open in heaven. And that's going to be something we're going to be able to see. That's another study all together. But it begins with the word then. So before the temple is open in heaven, we got to look back. And we're just going to look back at the summation, the end of it. Then I saw a white cloud, and seated on that cloud was someone like the Son of Man. He had a gold crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Then another angel came from the temple and shouted to the one sitting on the cloud, "Swing in your sickle, for the time of the harvest has come. The crop of the earth is ripe." So the one sitting on the cloud swung in his sickle over the earth, and the whole earth was harvested. After that, another angel came from the temple in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. Then another angel who had the power to destroy with fire came to the altar. He shouted to the angel with the sharp sickle, "Swing in your sickle to gather the clusters of grapes from the vines of the earth, for they are ripe for judgment." So this is the judgment process. This is the harvesting of the earth. We know that Jesus told parables about the earth's harvest. He used crops and grains and everything as symbols, and the sickle and all this stuff all ties in. So basically the earth is judged. The judgment of the earth happens before Armageddon, right? Because it says it right here. Then, so after this, I saw in heaven. And then when we get into Revelation 16, where we see the Armageddon down here, you see the word then. It follows after the earth is judged, and all the angels and all of heaven knows who's saved and who is lost. I heard a mighty voice from the temple say to the 7 angels, "Go your ways and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls containing God's wrath." So the last 7 plagues follow the judgment period, the final judgment in heaven. So the first angel left the temple and poured out his bowl on the earth, and horrible malignant sores broke out on everyone who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped his statue. So the very first plague sets a mark on the people who are lost. In other words, the whole world is going to be able to see for sure and identify all the people who are lost. And we're getting pretty close to that point, because basically what we're seeing is after Hamas attacked Israel, we're seeing all the people who support Hamas, who support killing babies, who support slaughtering unarmed people, who think that's the greatest thing in the world, are all gathering together. So where does that put us in prophetic time? Well, we got to give it a little bit more time, because we're also seeing the people who basically just want to be left alone, who condemn those kind of attacks, who want to just live their lives, protect their families, live the way God told us to live, and who are supposed to be taking the gospel out and telling the people, living on the other side. And that's where we are right now. And we're going to take a look at those Bible references that were put in there in the editor. We're going to take a look at some of the other details on some of these things, because a lot of these details are explained right here in these verses, and we're going to do that in other studies. So Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, leave a comment. Spread the word around, because, hey, that's our job. We're part of God's army.